Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, White Dax. Today's case is about Brazilian Jhessica Freitas Almeida da Silva, born on the 27th of April 1991 in Rio de Janeiro. She was João and Cristina Freitas' only child. Jessica found out about being an exchange au pair in the US in her teens and was super interested in it. You live with an American family and look after their kids just like a nanny would, and you get about $800 per month, which is below minimum wage. It's not a career choice. It's a great way to learn American English, immersing in a different culture, and you get to travel a bit too. In her late teens, she was really interested in taking part in this exchange. Her parents were really not sure about it at first, as she hardly spoke any English. She hadn't ever travelled out of Brazil up to this point and had little to no experience taking care of children. You had to show you had experience working with children, so she soon found herself a placement locally, working as a substitute dance teacher, and also she volunteered at a daycare for children with special needs. She also took a driver's license. She enrolled into the au pair exchange program through the Cultural Care Agency, and after a few interviews was on her way to the US. She travelled on the 3rd of January 2010 and started working for the family. Their surname is Freitas, in Great River, New York. She was looking after 3 kids, a 4-year-old with special needs, a 7 and an 11-year-old. Jessica remained as an au pair for the maximum time of 2 years, and in December of 2011 she was granted her biggest wish, which was to attend Suffolk Community College. She told her parents that she was looking for another family to work for, as her time was up on the exchange program. The Freitas family offered to extend her stay with them, just not as part of the exchange program. She had applied to remain in the US on a student visa, which apparently is the way that a lot of foreign au pairs extend their stay there. Some families pay the au pairs a little more, as they are no longer paying the agency, and some even pay for the university fees instead of a salary each family worked it out their way. In Jessica's case, they offered her a Honda Civic and they gave her a raise. Her parents travelled to the US to visit her and do a bit of sightseeing in March of 2012. They found her happy and excited for her future plans of studying at the community college. They remained in regular contact with their daughter. They were close, they shared everything together. The last contact they had with her was on Thursday the 29th of March 2012, when she rang them to say she'd paid her university fees with money they had wired her, and that she had also bought a book for her course. They tried to get in touch with her for the following 3 days, and they could not get hold of her, which was very unusual because they spoke every day usually. On the 1st of April 2012, Jessica was found in her bedroom, lifeless. Police were called, and only the following day, on the 2nd, were her parents contacted. At first, her mum, Christina's reaction was to think that someone was winding her up. She thought it was just a bad joke. And then she called her husband home from work, and they tried to piece together what could have happened. They called a friend over to help them with translating, but they didn't get very far over the phone because the host family parents just kept repeatedly apologizing remorsefully. Everyone was in utter shock. They contacted the Brazilian consulate and had a conference call with an official translator who did her best to help the families communicate back and forth. Also on the call was a police investigator taking note of what the Ceres family said took place. Jessica's dad, Joel, found it odd that the investigator spent a whole lot of time asking questions about Jessica, but not about them, the Ceres, the host family. He only seemed to focus on Jessica. He asked whether a note had been left, and they said that there was no note. He asked whether she was on any meds, and they said that they didn't find any. Now it's claimed that John Ceres told 2 different accounts of what Jessica's movements were in the days before her death. First he said that she had gone out on the Friday night and not come home, and all of Saturday too. She had never done that in the 2 years and 4 months that she had lived with them, so they weren't sure what had happened. According to Jessica's father, Joel, this was his version of what had happened over the phone. And then in person, whilst talking things through again, he recounted a different version of what had happened. He then said she had apparently missed the last train at 2 a.m. and had had to wait until 5 in the morning for the first train, but that she had had morning coffee with the family that Saturday morning. The children's grandparents were there, and she had chatted to them nicely, as you do, before going back up to her room. On Sunday morning, she didn't come downstairs for breakfast or lunch, which left his wife a bit concerned. She'd gone up to knock on her door, but it was locked and there was no answer from Jessica. John wasn't home at the time, but when he returned, he also tried knocking, and when she still didn't answer, he broke down the door. He found her lifeless, her body half in and half out of her wardrobe. He immediately called 911 and the cops arrived to investigate what had happened. Jessica's dad found it strange that, as it was a crime scene, that the host family were free to spend 12 hours going through her room without any police interception. They felt that the room should have been sealed off, but as it was within the Freitas family home, it's hard to know what the police actually stipulated. On the 3rd of April, Jessica's father decided he would go to the US to find out more about what had happened with his daughter and to bring her body back to Brazil. Prior to this, John Freitas rang them to ask whether they could offer to purchase the ticket for Christina, Jessica's mother, so that she too could be present. According to the Freitas' family, the Freitas were suggesting the funeral could take place in the US and that they would help towards the costs of her cremation. It's pointed out that he says cremation and not burial. Jessica's parents declined the offer, and as originally planned, only Joel, Jessica's father, flew to the US. He arrived on the 4th of April and was taken straight to the police station, though at this point he was not allowed access to any of the investigation. He wasn't allowed to see her body, but instead asked to formally identify her through a photograph. He was not permitted to keep it. He was then taken to the funeral parlour where he met John Freitas to make the arrangements for his daughter's body to be returned to Brazil. The Freitas family offered to pay half of the fees in the US, which Joel, Jessica's father, was taken aback by. He said that considering his daughter had worked for them for over 2 years, earning below the minimum wage, the least that they could do was cover the costs in the US, because her family were going to be paying for her funeral in Brazil. The authorities handed him 2 suitcases of her belongings taken from the Freitas family home, though he and his wife only went through it once he had returned. More on this later. What the police did tell him was that Jessica had strangled herself. She had been found with a belt around her neck, like a noose, and then she'd wrapped a scarf around the outside of the belt. In short, her parents just didn't buy it. None of it. Their daughter was happy in life. and she was preparing for a new stage, just about to start community college, something she had wished for and was so excited about. Choosing to end her own life in the middle of all this excitement, it just didn't add up. It made absolutely no sense. But as it so often happens in moments in life such as these, the world around us doesn't stop. The arrangements had been made to return her body to Brazil, and so he too flew home. Her funeral took place, and her body was laid to rest in Rio de Janeiro. Now, returning to those two suitcases that had been passed on to Joel, to Jessica's father, when he arrived in the US. When he and his wife went through them back at home, they found that certain belongings were missing. One of them being a pendant that Jessica always wore, and clearly holding a lot of sentimental value to them. When prompted, the Freitas, the host family, admitted that they had donated a number of her things to their church without her parents' blessing. In addition to this, it was some time later when Jessica's mobile and iPad were returned, not to her parents, but to the Freitas, and these two apparently given away. This just added more fuel to the fire between the families, as Jessica's parents truly felt that they had not been given any conclusive information as to what had really happened to their daughter. There might have been crucial information on those devices, and they never got to see them. Who knows what might have been on them? Returning back to 2012, what her parents did receive was her death certificate, stating her cause of death as suicide. They felt a lot was lacking as a result of poor investigation. They began their own private investigation in 2013 through the Brazilian justice in Rio de Janeiro. They were authorized to exhume her body, and in short, what was found was that she had very high levels of doxylamine in her liver. By now it was a year after her death, so she would have had to have ingested very high dosages for it to still be in her system this much time later. Doxylamine is an antihistamine that helps you sleep longer, but it is also known as a GHB, a drug used to make someone pass out, basically known as a date rape drug. Had there not been such a high dosage, it wouldn't have shown up that many months later. A Brazilian news program that only broadcasts on Sundays, called Domingo Espetacular, produced a documentary on her case some years later. They went all out. They set up a bedroom in the Freitas household exactly as it had been on that tragic day, based on photos from the scene. By this point, the police had handed over some of the documents to her parents, including 50 photographs of the actual scene, which is how the reporters got their information. They recreated the scene using a woman of the same weight and height as Jessica. What stood out was that Jessica had no visible markings around her neck at all. How could that even be? As well as this, it was noted that in the photographs taken of the scene, everything was meticulously in order around her. All her clothes in her closet were neatly put away, not a stitch out of place. How does that even make any sense? In the documentary, it was therefore concluded that foul play could not be ruled out. Her family have spent the years since her passing fighting the system, both in Brazil and in the US. They have struggled to get anywhere. Police basically maintain that her death is due to suicide, purely from lack of evidence. Her family have set up a page that you can visit, and please do check it out. It's #FightForJess. Please note that they spell her name Jhess, and you can also support her family hugely if you go to change.org and sign the petition online. The more signatures, the more attention it brings to her case, and the better chance that her family have of getting the answers that they so deserve. I will of course leave the links in the description box below, and I urge you to do so. Thank you everyone so much for watching.